Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world of sand-washed skies, torchlight flickering against marble columns, and the hum of Nile waters carrying secrets from one age to the next. You're standing in Alexandria, not the Alexandria you know today with cars and traffic lights, but the Alexandria of 69 BCE. The air smells of papyrus scrolls and incense, of sea spray clashing with the heat of the desert. Somewhere inside a palace overlooking the waves, a baby girl cries for the first time, and her voice will one day be so loud, metaphorically, of course, that it echoes across the whole world. This is Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. And yes, you probably won't survive this dynasty's family drama if you had to live in it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love picturing our little midnight club scattered all over the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in the nursery hall, mosaics glittering under oil lamps. Cleopatra is born into the Ptolemaic dynasty, a royal family of Greek origin who've ruled Egypt since the days of Alexander the Great. The Ptolemies speak Greek at court, eat Greek food, and argue in Greek accents, but they sit on the throne of Egypt. That's like someone ruling Italy today but refusing to touch pasta. Odd, right? And yet, that contradiction shapes Cleopatra from the first breath she takes. The baby's name means glory of her father. But fathers in this family, well, they come with baggage. Ptolemy XII, her dad, is nicknamed Orleats, the flute player. Not because he's musically gifted but because he prefers partying with musicians to ruling responsibly. Imagine your nation's leader being known mainly for karaoke nights. You can already see how this dynasty is a mix of Netflix drama and daytime soap opera. As you rock with the palace rhythm, you can't ignore how fragile the scene feels. Rome, yes, that massive, growing empire, is sniffing around Egypt like a cat circling a fishbowl. Egypt is rich in grain, papyrus, and gold, and Rome wants all of it. Cleopatra doesn't know it yet, but her cradle rocks on tectonic plates of history. You catch whispers from the nurses, she isn't the first Cleopatra. There have been 6 before her, but none will have her legend. Already, her dark eyes dart about as if she senses the weight of destiny. Or maybe she's just hungry for milk. Historians still argue whether people exaggerate these baby genius moments. As she grows, you drift through the palace gardens with her. Imagine citrus trees, perfumed oils, tame gazelles nibbling from hand. Cleopatra learns early that survival in this family means watching, listening, calculating. Her siblings are rivals, not playmates. A smile might hide a dagger. The air is thick with incense and suspicion. One quirky tidbit you overhear: Cleopatra's family may have dabbled in weird protective charms. Some sources hint they believed crocodile dung could be mixed with honey for medicine, or worse, used as an early form of contraception. Yeah, that smell would definitely keep people away. You wrinkle your nose, realizing palace life wasn't just gold and pearls, it was also, well, experimental bathroom cabinets. But Cleopatra isn't just absorbing gossip. She's absorbing languages. Rumors claim she'll grow up to speak a dozen, including the Egyptian tongue her Greek ancestors always ignored. That choice alone makes her stand out. Imagine a politician today suddenly learning not just Spanish or French but also Klingon, just to prove a point. That's Cleopatra's vibe: bold, practical, and a little theatrical. You walk with her to the Royal Library, the great library of Alexandria still thriving with thousands of scrolls. She grows up among astronomers, mathematicians, philosophers. Her mind is shaped not only by beauty treatments and etiquette lessons but by geometry, rhetoric, and the poetry of Homer. She's tutored to be a queen in a world where queens often get erased. Pause, breathe in the salt air again. The palace opens onto the Mediterranean, where ships from Rhodes, Cyprus, and Rome dock. Little Cleopatra peers at sailors unloading amphorae of wine and grain. She probably has no idea yet that her fate will be tied not just to Egypt's shores, but to Rome's ambitions. Still, in her small footsteps you feel a strange magnetism, like watching the first spark before a wildfire. And as the moon glows over the harbor, you realize, this isn't just the birth of a girl. This is the beginning of a legend that will defy time, inspire Shakespeare, and confuse historians forever. You're here at the first flicker, the fragile beginning, and you sense the story tightening like a knot you can't untangle. You're still in that shimmering Alexandrian palace, but now the air feels thicker, less like the lull of a nursery, more like the tension before a thunderstorm. Cleopatra isn't a baby anymore, she's a young girl in a household where siblings aren't exactly hug-it-out types. In this royal family, love is conditional, trust is disposable, and family game night sometimes ends with someone mysteriously vanishing. The Ptolemaic dynasty is basically the world's longest-running sibling feud. Picture a reality show where everyone has crowns and daggers, and the season finale is always who gets the throne. Cleopatra's brothers and sisters were raised knowing that only one or two of them might make it out alive with power. Everyone else? Exile, execution, or oops, fell into the Nile. You trail Cleopatra as she watches her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, wobble through politics like a drunk tightrope walker. He spends so much time partying that the people hate him. Once, when the Egyptians riot, he flees to Rome for protection, yes, abandons his kingdom like a student skipping class after setting the lab on fire. Cleopatra, still a teenager, is left staring at a world where alliances decide survival. You learn early with her, loyalty in this palace is like quicksand. In the banquet hall, the rivalry takes center stage. Cleopatra's sisters, Arsinoe and Berenice, aren't just siblings. They're competitors. Imagine being seated at a family dinner where every smile is sharper than the silverware. Historical records say Berenice IV actually seized the throne while their father was away, declaring herself queen. And Cleopatra? She watches carefully, probably learning two things: 1. Never trust a sibling who offers you extra figs, and 2. Power in Egypt is fragile as glass. One mainstream fact here: it wasn't uncommon for Ptolemies to marry their own siblings. Yep, you heard that right. Brother and sister royal marriages were standard, supposedly to keep the bloodline pure. It was like a dynastic insurance policy, but also, yikes. Cleopatra's own future is tangled in this tradition, and you feel the looming unease of being both sister and potential bride in a deadly chessboard. And here's a quirky tidbit: the Ptolemaic banquets weren't just food and wine, they sometimes featured mechanical stagecraft. Think little automaton statues pouring libations, or a ceiling designed to rain down scented petals. Cleopatra probably grew up in halls where the dinner entertainment looked like early robotics experiments. Imagine the family still glaring daggers at each other while flower petals mechanically rained down. Awkward doesn't even cover it. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra genuinely loved any of her siblings or whether affection was impossible in such a blood-soaked dynasty. Did she ever laugh with Arsinoe as children? Did they once play by the palace fountains before the betrayals? Or was survival instinct already carving walls between them? You'll never know for sure, but you feel the tension tightening every time she glances at her brothers. You drift with Cleopatra into the throne room when Ptolemy XII returns, restored by Roman backing. But the cost is clear: Egypt's independence is slipping, the treasury drained, Rome's shadow looming large. Cleopatra learns a brutal truth: family betrayal is one threat, but Roman meddling is another, much bigger storm. One night, as torches flicker against hieroglyphs, Cleopatra hears whispers, her sister Berenice is executed on their father's orders. Imagine that, your own father killing your sister to secure his rule. It's like watching a chess match where pawns are your flesh and blood. Cleopatra doesn't flinch, she files the lesson away. Survival in this family isn't about love, it's about calculation. The palace gardens feel quieter now, though the scent of jasmine still hangs in the air. You see Cleopatra walking alone, her eyes sharper, her smile tighter. She understands, the family that should protect her might destroy her. And the Romans watching from across the sea are no less dangerous. Still, she adapts. Even as the family feuds devour those around her, Cleopatra studies, listens, and bides her time. She learns when to hold her tongue and when to charm. And you, drifting beside her, feel the strange mix of dread and admiration. This young girl is forged in a crucible where most would have crumbled. And as the night falls over Alexandria, you realize Cleopatra's legend isn't built on romance or beauty alone, it's built first on survival against the deadliest opponents imaginable, her own blood. You're back in Alexandria's palace corridors, and this time you notice something different. The echoing footsteps don't just sound like a royal child's play anymore. They're deliberate, paced, a little heavier. Cleopatra is growing older, and while her siblings sharpen knives, literally or politically, she sharpens something far more dangerous, her mind. Picture her in a high-ceilinged study lined with scrolls, reed pens laid neatly on polished wood. Tutors from Athens, scholars from the library, priests from the temples, all drifting in and out, their voices forming a chorus of knowledge. Cleopatra listens not as a passive student but as a sponge that soaks up every droplet of wisdom. And here's the fun twist, unlike her royal forebears, who often relied on translators, Cleopatra insists on learning languages herself. She's said to have mastered as many as 9 or more. Greek was her birthright, of course. But she also picked up Egyptian, the language most of her dynasty refused to speak, preferring their imported Greek aristocracy. Imagine the shock when Cleopatra, barely out of girlhood, could stand before Egyptian priests and converse with them in their own tongue. It's as if your boss suddenly addressed you in your grandmother's dialect, instant respect. Mainstream fact first, Cleopatra was actually the first Ptolemaic ruler in centuries to speak Egyptian fluently. This wasn't just trivia, it was politics. By breaking the family tradition of aloof Greek-only rulers, she connected with her people in a way her ancestors never dared. Now for a quirky tidbit, some historians suggest Cleopatra may have even studied Hebrew, Ethiopian, and possibly even Parthian dialects. Imagine her as the ancient world's ultimate polyglot queen, like a living version of Google Translate but with eyeliner sharper than a sword. There's even a rumor she dabbled in the language of the troglodytes, a mysterious tongue of tribes along the Red Sea. Did she ever need it? Who knows? But just picturing her casually flipping from Greek to Egyptian to Aramaic while her rivals stumbled over a phrase, it's almost comical. And here's the open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether she truly spoke as many languages as later writers claim, or whether her multilingual legend was exaggerated to make her image larger than life. Was she genuinely rattling off Ethiopian, or was that just ancient PR? Either way, the idea stuck, and ideas, especially in history, often matter as much as facts. Follow her now into the temple courtyards. The stone is cool under your sandals, lotus blossoms floating in the sacred pools. Cleopatra leans forward to speak with Egyptian priests, not through an interpreter but in words they understand directly. Their surprise, then delight, creates a ripple effect. She's not just another Greek ruler perched on Pharaoh's throne. She feels Egyptian, and that subtle shift cements loyalty that weapons alone could never secure. Back in her private chambers, you notice something else, scrolls of poetry beside jars of cosmetics. Cleopatra studies medicine and philosophy with the same intensity she applies to eyeliner. She isn't choosing between beauty or brains, she's weaving both. One scroll describes herbal remedies for fevers, another explains astronomy. She's the kind of queen who could heal you with a poultice, then debate Aristotle while you recover. Talk about multitasking. Her tutors sometimes test her with riddles. What rules men more, power or desire, they ask. Cleopatra smiles, knowing the trick, both are intertwined, and she plans to master them equally. One evening, under a ceiling painted with constellations, she practices speeches in multiple tongues. Her voice carries smooth and clear, echoing off the stone. You can almost hear the cadence, the rhythm designed not just to speak, but to enchant. Some later Roman writers sneered, claiming she wasn't that beautiful, but her voice, they admitted, was unforgettable. You realize now, charisma is her weapon, sharpened through language. And as you trail her along the colonnade, the sea breeze tugging at her linen dress, you can't help but think, Cleopatra is building an arsenal. Not swords, not shields, but words. Words that can win allies, soothe priests, charm generals, and later, seduce some of Rome's most powerful men. For now, though, she is still young, still learning, still preparing. But you sense it, like the hum in the air before a storm, Cleopatra is becoming a queen who will speak not just to her people, but to history itself. You're still walking through the marble corridors of Alexandria, but the air is different now. Less about childish rivalry or scholarly lessons, this is Cleopatra stepping into womanhood, and everyone around her is whispering the same thing: is she beautiful? Or is it something else entirely? Because here's the catch, you probably grew up with the Hollywood Cleopatra, Elizabeth Taylor eyes, perfect brows, skin that glows like polished marble. But history complicates things. Ancient coins with her profile don't show a flawless goddess. The nose is strong, the chin sharp, the forehead high. Some might even say her face wasn't classically beautiful at all. Yet, people who met her said she could bend entire rooms to her will. So you walk with her now, past polished bronze mirrors, past jars of scented oils and crushed malachite powders for eyeshadow. She experiments with perfumes, frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, lotus blossom, because scent matters in a palace where every entrance is a performance. She wears pearls in her ears, gold collars at her throat, linen so fine it whispers when she moves. But her greatest accessory? Her presence. Mainstream fact, Cleopatra's charisma was legendary. The historian Plutarch wrote that her beauty alone was not remarkable, but her conversation and her voice made her irresistible. She wasn't simply admired, she was remembered like a song that stuck in your head long after you'd stopped listening. Quirky tidbit. Some sources claim Cleopatra created her own cosmetics and perfumes, experimenting with formulas to craft her signature aura. Recipes passed down through fragments include one of the oldest documented lipsticks, made from crushed carmine beetles mixed with beeswax. Yep, beetle lip. Imagine pulling that out at Sephora today. Would you like that in scarlet or Nile red? Historians still argue whether Cleopatra deliberately exaggerated her allure with theatrics or whether her personality was genuinely magnetic. Was she consciously performing Cleopatra every time she entered a room, or did charisma just radiate out of her naturally? The debate itself is proof nobody could agree on her, even in her own lifetime. You notice the way servants stop mid-task when she passes. Even the guards, trained to stand like statues, shift ever so slightly, their eyes following her. She's not just walking, she's commanding space. And the young men at court. They lean a little closer, laugh a little louder, hoping for her attention. But Cleopatra doesn't give it freely. She measures people with her gaze, studies how they respond to her voice. For her, Beauty isn't about symmetry of features, it's a game of power. Make someone feel seen, make them feel clever, make them feel desired, and you own them. At a palace banquet, you see this play out. She leans across a table of roasted goose and honey cakes, listening intently to a visiting scholar recite poetry. He blushes, stammers, convinced she's entranced. In truth, she's already moved on in her mind, calculating his political usefulness. It's a little savage, but brilliant. The perfumes in the air are heady tonight, mixed with wine, mixed with the burn of torches. Cleopatra laughs, and the whole room pivots toward her like sunflowers to the light. That's when you get it. It doesn't matter if her nose is long or her chin is sharp. She's magnetic because she makes you forget everything else. Later, alone in her private garden, she leans over a still pool, candlelight flickering against her reflection. Does she wonder herself? Does she ask, "Am I beautiful enough?" Or does she already know that beauty fades, but influence lasts? You remember the crocodile dung contraception from earlier? Well, tonight you overhear another odd rumor whispered by servants. Cleopatra may have worn pearl powder mixed with vinegar as a skin treatment. Acidic facials 2,000 years before TikTok trends leave it to her to be ahead of the curve. She strolls through the moonlit gardens, lilies brushing her fingertips, and you realize she isn't playing by anyone else's rules. She isn't trying to fit into Greek ideals of beauty or Egyptian hieroglyphic profiles. She's crafting her own brand, one that mixes intellect, scent, charm, and wit into something far more potent than a symmetrical face. As you follow her back into the palace, past walls painted with gods and goddesses, you can't help but smile at the irony. Centuries later, people will still argue, was Cleopatra truly beautiful? And the answer, standing right in front of you, is obvious. Beauty was never the point. She was unforgettable. And you feel it, she's sharpening her weapons, not of steel, but of self. Ready for the moment when Rome comes crashing into her life, and beauty versus brains won't be a question at all. The palace is quiet tonight, so quiet that you can hear the sea sighing against Alexandria's great harbor walls. But inside one chamber, a plan is hatching that will change not only Cleopatra's life but the fate of the ancient world. You follow her footsteps as she whispers to her most trusted servant, preparing for one of the most famous entrances in all of history. Her younger years are behind her now. She's no longer just the clever princess who speaks Egyptian and experiments with perfumes. She is queen, well, half-queen, forced to co-rule with her younger brother Ptolemy XIII, a boy barely in his teens. And the boy's advisors? They want Cleopatra gone. Faction against faction, sibling against sibling, remember those family feuds? They're back with venom. Eventually, Cleopatra is pushed into exile, wandering the deserts of Syria with only a few loyal supporters. But fate, or maybe fortune's twisted sense of humor, offers her a chance. Julius Caesar himself has landed in Alexandria. Yes, that's Caesar, the Roman general who conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, and has Rome wrapped around his little finger. He's come to Egypt on diplomatic business, which really means sorting out the mess of Cleopatra and her brother's quarrel. And here's where the famous rug story begins. Cleopatra knows she cannot just walk into Caesar's palace, her brother's guards would kill her on the spot. So she devises one of the boldest stunts in history. She has herself rolled up in a carpet, or maybe, as some argue, a laundry sack of linen, and smuggled through the gates. You crouch in the shadows, watching servants carry the bundle up the marble steps, past flickering torches, into Caesar's chambers. They unroll it, and, whoosh, out tumbles Cleopatra, dressed not in queenly gold but in simplicity, eyes sparkling with daring. She looks up at Caesar, her hair tousled, and smiles as if to say, surprise. Mainstream fact, Plutarch himself recounts this dramatic meeting, though whether it was truly a carpet or just clever dramatization remains debated. Quirky tidbit. Some versions say Cleopatra scented the cloth with her own custom perfume so that when it unfurled, Caesar was hit not just with her presence but her fragrance. Imagine that, stepping into history like the world's most daring perfume commercial. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's entrance was carefully staged seduction or pure survival instinct. Was she really playing romance, or was she simply ensuring her throne by attaching herself to Rome's most powerful man? Either way, the move worked. Now imagine Caesar's point of view. He's 52, grizzled from years of war, scarred but still commanding. She's 21, radiant, audacious, unafraid. He's seen kings kneel, armies crumble, enemies grovel, but here is a queen who dares to tumble out of a carpet in his private chambers. No one does that to Caesar. No one, except Cleopatra. You watch the two of them talk late into the night. He asks questions in Latin, she answers in Greek, both leaning closer with every exchange. Her voice, her wit, her boldness, they strike him like arrows sharper than any sword. And beneath the torchlight, an alliance begins, one that will intertwine power and passion in a way that still makes historians raise eyebrows. Outside, the city simmers with tension. Cleopatra's brother Ptolemy XIII fumes, his advisors whispering about Roman interference. Civil war brews in the streets, Alexandrians clashing, torches flaring, screams echoing against stone. Yet inside these walls, Cleopatra holds Caesar's gaze, already plotting how to turn this Roman giant into her shield. You slip out into the harbor with her the next day, disguised in plain clothes, feeling the salt air whip across your face. Cleopatra points toward the lighthouse of Pharos, its flame guiding ships across the sea. Egypt must shine like that, she murmurs, or Rome will devour us whole. You realize she isn't just playing a romance, she's gambling Egypt's entire survival on her partnership with Caesar. Still, she knows performance matters. Later, when she sails with Caesar on the Nile, she stages it with all the drama of a theater play. Gilded barges, purple sails, musicians piping exotic melodies. Cleopatra reclines beneath a canopy, her attendants waving fans, her laughter drifting across the water. She isn't just accompanying Caesar, she's showing him Egypt's splendor, reminding him she is not a refugee queen but a monarch worth Rome's respect. And you? You sit at the edge of the barge, feet dangling above the Nile, realizing that this meeting, rug, perfume, wit, and all, isn't just romance. It's politics disguised as intimacy, survival cloaked in allure. Cleopatra has stepped into Caesar's story, and in doing so, ensured her own legend will never fade. The night winds down, the barge rocking gently, moonlight splintering across the Nile. Caesar leans closer, Cleopatra's laughter lingers in the air, and you sense it, the world has tilted. Rome and Egypt are no longer separate. They are entangled, knotted by ambition and a queen's daring entrance rolled up in a carpet. The torches in Alexandria burn late into the night, and you're standing in the palace again, though now the atmosphere is electric, half victory, half danger. Cleopatra has pulled off what seemed impossible, she secured Caesar's favor. And with that, she doesn't just walk back into power, she strides, with her chin high, as if the city were always hers. But history is never neat. Because while Cleopatra may have won Caesar's admiration, the civil war with her brother Ptolemy XIII is still raging. The streets outside echo with clashing steel and Roman shouts, as Caesar's legions fight against the boy king's forces. Smoke curls into the sky, and you feel the walls tremble with the fury of battle. Cleopatra doesn't flinch, she's too busy calculating her next move. Mainstream fact first, Caesar defeats Ptolemy XII's forces in what becomes known as the Alexandrian War. The boy king flees the city but drowns in the Nile during the escape, his golden armor pulling him down like a stone. That leaves Cleopatra free to ascend the throne again, this time not as a co-ruler at the mercy of siblings, but as queen in her own right. And here's the quirky tidbit: during those chaotic months, parts of Alexandria's great library may have been destroyed in the fighting. Imagine it: scrolls of lost plays, maps of ancient lands, recipes, even medical texts, all going up in flames because of palace drama. You're standing in a city where every corner smells faintly of smoke and ink, like the ghosts of knowledge whispering from charred parchment. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra herself encouraged Caesar to burn Ptolemy's fleet in the harbor, which accidentally spread to nearby warehouses and libraries. Was it deliberate strategy or careless collateral damage? Either way, the irony is sharp. While Cleopatra secures her throne, priceless fragments of the ancient world vanish forever. But the story isn't just politics and flames. It's also intensely personal. Cleopatra and Caesar are more than allies now, they're lovers. The city buzzes with gossip, servants smirking behind curtains, senators in Rome clutching their togas in scandal. You wander through the palace gardens at night, where the two of them walk together. Caesar, hardened by decades of campaigns, seems softened here. Cleopatra leans in, whispering jokes in Greek, her laughter rolling through the jasmine-scented air. One evening, you see her cradling something far more fragile than an empire, a child. Caesarion, their son, is born, and with him comes both joy and danger. Cleopatra names him Ptolemy 15, but whispers call him Little Caesar. She parades him through Alexandria, dressed in golden robes, his tiny hand waving to the crowd. For her, Caesarion is more than a child. He's proof, a living bond between Egypt and Rome, between Cleopatra and Caesar. But you sense the tremor beneath the joy. Because back in Rome, Caesar already has a legitimate heir named Octavia, and a wife. Caesarion's existence is a scandal wrapped in a swaddle. To the Alexandrians, the boy is divine. To Rome, he's an awkward problem. And yet Cleopatra doesn't shrink from scandal. She doubles down. Imagine the royal barge again, but bigger, grander, sails dyed Tyrian purple, oars tipped with silver. Cleopatra reclines beneath a golden canopy, Caesarion nestled beside her, as crowds cheer along the Nile banks. She isn't just queen now, she's goddess, mother, and living symbol of Egypt's survival. One night, you overhear her speaking to Caesar by lamplight. Together, we could rule the world. She means it, not in a dreamy, star-crossed way, but as a genuine political blueprint. And for a moment, you almost believe it. But you also hear the faint warnings. Caesar's aides murmur about the dangers of being too tied to this exotic queen. Senators in Rome already resent Caesar's power, his ambition, his refusal to bow to tradition. Adding Cleopatra to the mix? It's like tossing olive oil onto a fire. You slip into the nursery where Caesarion sleeps, lulled by the hum of the Nile outside. Cleopatra sits nearby, watching him with a softness she rarely shows in public. Her fingers trace the child's cheek, and for a fleeting second, she isn't the calculating queen or the theatrical goddess. She's just a mother. You realize then that beneath all the politics, Cleopatra's gamble is deeply human. She wants her son to live, to thrive, to one day rule a world balanced between Egypt and Rome. The irony, of course, is that the very act of dreaming that big paints an even brighter target on both of their backs. The night closes around you, cicadas buzzing in the reeds, waves slapping against the harbor walls. Cleopatra whispers to her son, though he's too young to understand, the world will remember us. And you know she's right, because here you are, 2,000 years later, still following her story, still caught in the glow of her ambition, her audacity, her gamble with love and power. The palace is quieter now, though Alexandria itself seems to pulse like a living heartbeat. You wander its marble corridors with Cleopatra, noting the way torchlight flickers against frescoed walls, casting shadows that dance like whispers of old secrets. Caesar is in Rome more often than here, but his presence lingers, like the faint scent of his cloak still clinging to the stone. You feel it every time Cleopatra paces, plotting, dreaming, or simply laughing in that way that seems to bend the room around her. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, and her alliance with Caesar marked the beginning of a dangerously intimate link between Egypt and Rome. The power she wields is unprecedented for a woman of her time. She speaks multiple languages, knows law, science, and military strategy, and uses all of it to keep her throne. You watch her navigate a court where every smile could mask a dagger and every compliment may carry a hidden threat. Quirky tidbit: Cleopatra was rumored to have had a passion for cosmetics so elaborate that she would dye her sails red to match her favorite lipstick when sailing on the Nile. Some historians argue it was vanity, others claim it was a tactical show of grandeur to impress allies and intimidate rivals. Either way, you can't help but imagine the royal barge gliding past, crimson sails glowing under the sun, Cleopatra waving like the queen of a floating festival. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's personal charms or her sheer political acumen mattered more in winning over powerful Roman men. And as you walk behind her, listening to her whisper plans to advisors in Greek, it's clear she blends both with effortless flair. You follow her into the gardens that hug the palace walls, where papyrus and lotus grow in chaotic beauty. Here, Cleopatra shows a softer side, sitting by a fountain where water gurgles over carved stone. She tells stories of her youth, of wild nights with friends, or secret trips through Alexandria's hidden streets, places only royalty and trusted aides dare wander. You notice how she touches the plants, speaks to birds, even smiles at passing servants as if to remind them, and herself, that life exists beyond politics. But then the tension returns. Caesar's assassination in Rome throws the world into chaos. You watch Cleopatra receive the news, her face a mask of composure at first. Yet underneath, you sense a storm. Rome is destabilized, Caesar gone, and now her son Caesarion is the last living tie to Roman power. You see her make a decision that would shock even the most daring generals. She travels to Tarsus to meet Mark Antony, a man whose reputation rivals Caesar's in charisma, ambition, and danger. Cleopatra knows she must secure a new Roman ally, or risk losing everything. And here's where her flair for the dramatic returns. She arrives in Tarsus aboard a barge unlike any other, gilded, scented with exotic oils, sails shimmering in jewel tones. You can practically hear the whispers among Antony's soldiers: who is this queen who turns rivers into theaters? Who commands such attention without uttering a single word? Mainstream fact: Cleopatra's meeting with Mark Antony is often described as a calculated political maneuver to secure Egyptian sovereignty. She presents herself as a goddess of Egypt, a ruler whose resources and cunning cannot be ignored. Quirky tidbit: some sources suggest she had a pet leopard on board, or at least a trained animal resembling one, to add a subtle note of danger and exoticism. Imagine leaning over the railing of the barge, the sun glinting off scales and fur, Cleopatra smiling at Antony while her pet prowls nearby. Talk about making an entrance. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra truly captivated Antony with personality alone or whether the opulence and theatre of her arrival did most of the work. Either way, it's a spectacle that cements her reputation across the Mediterranean. You walk along the shore with her, Antony pacing beside the barge. Cleopatra's eyes gleam with strategy and mischief. She knows the stakes. A future Egypt dependent on Rome, a son whose life is entwined with Roman politics, an empire hanging by a thread, all balanced on her brilliance and audacity. As night falls, the Tarsus sky is a deep velvet, dotted with stars. You hear Cleopatra hum an old hymn, perhaps one her mother taught her, and you realize that for all the drama and danger, she is deeply human, ambitious, playful, loving, and fearless. The world may change, but she remains a force, sculpting history with every gesture, every choice, every calculated smile. And you can't help but admire her, even if you know that the river's calm now hides storms yet to come, storms that will test her, her son, and her empire in ways the world has never seen. The Mediterranean sun burns low over Alexandria as you trudge along the marble-paved docks, watching Cleopatra prepare for what will be remembered as one of the most theatrical displays in history. Mark Antony has returned to her side, and together, they plan a demonstration of wealth, power, and subtle intimidation. Cleopatra isn't just a queen now, she's a spectacle, a living allegory of Egypt itself. You feel the energy in the air, like static before a lightning storm. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra and Mark Antony stage what becomes known as the Feast of the Nile, or Donations of Alexandria, where she parades nobles, priests, and ambassadors through a carefully orchestrated pageantry, showcasing her wealth, military alliances, and political cleverness. Every gesture is intentional, every smile calculated. You notice how Cleopatra uses ceremony to solidify her authority, presenting gifts and honors that intertwine her rule with Rome's ambitions. Quirky tidbit: Cleopatra's feast included exotic foods, peacocks, ostrich eggs, and honey-soaked dates, and some accounts suggest she had a favorite recipe that involved camel's milk fermented with figures. You can almost taste it, sweet and tangy, while the Nile breeze carries the mingled aromas of spices, river mud, and incense. Historians still chuckle at how modern chefs might recreate this banquet today, but you probably wouldn't survive it, either. Historians still argue whether the Donations of Alexandria were purely political theatre or if Cleopatra genuinely sought to establish her son Caesarion as a co-ruler with territories granted in his name. You watch her as she gestures toward her son, pride and strategy intertwining in her gaze, knowing that each move sets both expectation and tension across the Mediterranean. You follow Cleopatra through the palatial corridors afterward, where the scent of lotus and myrrh lingers. She talks with Antony about strategy, their words a blend of intimate whispers and calculated political dialogue. Their relationship, part romance, part alliance, part spectacle, fascinates and unnerves you. They walk into the gardens, where the Nile glints like liquid gold, and you see her softer, human side again, laughing as Antony fumbles with a lotus bloom, her finger tapping his shoulder gently. But there's danger too. Octavian, the future Augustus, watches from Rome, noting every rumor, every dispatch. Cleopatra knows Rome's shifting power will not wait for her desires. Antony is powerful, yes, but he is mortal, fallible, and entwined in Roman politics that do not favor foreign queens. And then, you witness Cleopatra in her private chambers, planning a naval campaign alongside Antony. The strategy is brilliant yet audacious. The combined forces of Egypt and Antony's Roman legions will challenge Octavian's fleet, asserting dominance across the Mediterranean. You can feel the tension crackle as maps are unfurled and soldiers' reports are read aloud, each syllable carrying potential disaster or triumph. Quirky side note: Cleopatra is said to have personally tested some naval vessels on the Nile, even reportedly sleeping aboard the ships to ensure their readiness. Imagine her standing at the prow, hair braided with beads, the river mist cooling her skin, asserting command over men twice her size, and somehow making it look effortless. Historians still argue whether her naval inspections were symbolic gestures for Antony or genuinely hands-on military planning. Either way, the Queen's presence inspires loyalty and curiosity in everyone around her. You follow her into the night once more. Alexandria gleams under the moonlight, torches lining the walls and reflections dancing across the river. Cleopatra pauses, looking out over her city, whispering to herself, "They will not forget me." You realize she speaks not only of Antony or Octavian but of history itself. Every grand gesture, every performance, every risky alliance is meant to etch her name into the minds of generations. And you, quietly trailing behind, sense that Cleopatra thrives in this blend of spectacle and strategy, intimacy and political theatre, courage and cunning. The world may be shifting, Rome may loom large, but she stands at the center, undaunted, unbowed, unforgettable. The morning fog rises from the Nile, curling around Alexandria like ghostly ribbons, and you follow Cleopatra as she prepares for the next phase of her plan, the transformation of a political alliance into a legend. Antony is nearby, but Cleopatra knows she must outshine even the most charismatic Roman general. Every decision she makes is measured, yet somehow appears effortless, like a dancer gliding through a crowded hall. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra and Antony solidify their partnership through marriage ceremonies in 37 BCE, formalizing their bond both politically and personally. You can almost feel the tension in the air as Egyptian priests and Roman emissaries converge, symbols of tradition and ambition colliding in one extravagant ceremony. The marriage strengthens Cleopatra's claim to Egypt and links Antony directly to her rule, a union designed to shake Rome's delicate balance of power. Quirky tidbit: some sources suggest that Cleopatra staged elaborate fireworks and pyrotechnic displays during the ceremony, using early Greek fire techniques to dazzle and intimidate. Imagine watching flames lick the sky while the Nile reflects sparks, and Antony squints, caught somewhere between awe and mild panic. Historians still debate whether such spectacles were actual events or the later embellishments of Roman writers trying to dramatize her persona. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's marriage to Antony was driven more by genuine affection or sheer political necessity. You can see it both ways as she flits between playful banter and careful negotiation, mastering the balance between lover and sovereign. After the ceremony, you walk with Cleopatra through the palace, passing opulent halls where frescoes depict Egypt's gods and pharaohs in vivid color. She explains her vision for the future, pointing to maps of the eastern Mediterranean, territories she hopes to secure for her son Caesarion and her Egyptian empire. Each territory is a chess piece, each decision a gambit designed to protect her lineage and assert her dominance. But power comes with peril. Octavian in Rome watches carefully, waiting for the right moment to exploit any misstep. You overhear her aides whispering, noting the growing threat, yet Cleopatra remains serene, almost amused by the looming danger. She thrives on this tension, it sharpens her mind, strengthens her resolve. And then there is the intimacy, rare and precious. Antony retreats to his quarters, leaving Cleopatra alone with the evening Nile breeze curling through the windows. She allows herself a quiet moment, brushing her fingers over her son's tiny hand, remembering Caesar and the risks they took. The world outside the palace walls teeters on the brink of war, but here, she is mother and queen, cunning strategist and tender guardian, all at once. Quirky aside, Cleopatra reportedly had a habit of testing perfumes on Antony before sending them to Rome as gifts. Imagine him recoiling or laughing as she dabs a few drops on his wrist, whispering, "If this doesn't impress, you're dead to me." Some historians suggest this was just playful, others claim it was a subtle form of influence over a man used to commanding armies. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's influence over Antony was primarily personal or entirely political. You watch as she combines both seamlessly, blending affection with persuasion, teasing with strategy, romance with ruthless calculation. You wander to the balcony overlooking the Nile, the city lit like a constellation spread across the riverbanks. Cleopatra leans on the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon, where fleets and empires will collide. She whispers to herself, and perhaps to you, the words that have guided her life: "We are the masters of our fate." You feel the pulse of history, vibrating through the very stones beneath your feet, and realize that Cleopatra isn't just living in her moment, she is crafting it, bending events to her will, leaving an indelible mark that will echo for centuries. The night deepens, and the Nile hums softly, carrying secrets downstream, secrets that Cleopatra will use, manipulate, and protect as she sails forward into the chaos and romance of power, ambition, and war. The air is thick with the scent of river mud and lotus blossoms as you trudge beside Cleopatra along the bustling Alexandria docks. Ships creak and groan under the weight of supplies, soldiers, and treasures meant for the coming campaign against Octavian. You can feel the anticipation buzzing in the air like an invisible drumbeat, the kind that makes your skin tingle and your heartbeat sync with the pulse of history itself. Cleopatra walks confidently, every step measured, every glance calculated, yet there's a hint of mischief in her eyes that reminds you she thrives on chaos as much as control. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra and Antony prepare a combined Egyptian-Roman fleet to face Octavian in the decisive conflict that history will call the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. You watch as she inspects ships personally, issuing orders that shock even seasoned naval officers. Her strategic mind is razor-sharp, navigating not just rivers but human ambition, loyalty, and fear. Every detail matters, from the angle of the sails to the morale of the rowers who will soon confront Rome's mightiest fleet. Quirky tidbit: some ancient accounts suggest Cleopatra had a floating throne on one of her flagship vessels, adorned with gold and semi-precious stones, allowing her to appear as a living goddess to the fleet and opponents alike. You imagine her sitting there, a golden silhouette against the dawn sky, every gesture choreographed for maximum awe and intimidation. Historians still debate whether this was a true military advantage or merely theatrical flair, but it certainly seems like something Cleopatra would do. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's presence on the battlefield was symbolic or strategically critical. Watching her stride across the deck, giving instructions and measuring the morale of her soldiers, it's hard not to believe it was both. You follow her through the corridors of the flagship, where the smell of tar, sweat, and incense mingle into a surprisingly intoxicating perfume. She stops at the galley, checking supplies and conversing with the cooks about provisions for the cruise. Her attention to detail is remarkable. She treats everyone, from generals to rowers, with a mixture of respect and cunning observation. Every action reinforces her authority and keeps the men around her on their toes. Even so, Cleopatra's human side emerges in quiet moments. She pauses to feed a tame falcon perched on her arm, murmuring soft words in Greek. You realize that for all her political maneuvering and grand spectacle, she retains a deep connection to the smaller, quieter pleasures of life, nature, animals, even fleeting companionship. And then comes the tension. Antony's advisors grow restless, whispering warnings about Octavian's cunning, the fleet's disadvantages, and the unpredictable winds. Cleopatra listens, nodding, weighing each argument carefully, yet she never reveals her complete plan. There's a playfulness in the way she counters suggestions, challenging assumptions, making men think she's unpredictable when, in reality, every move is deliberate. Quirky aside, Cleopatra reportedly tested the loyalty of her sailors by disguising herself and walking among them, gauging their reactions. Some historians suggest this may be an exaggerated tale, but the image of a queen blending into a common crowd, even briefly, seems almost poetic, a quiet reminder that she never takes power for granted. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's involvement in military decisions at Actium was hands-on or largely advisory. As you watch her trace lines on maps with a delicate hand yet unwavering confidence, it's clear she is a force on both intellectual and emotional fronts. The night before the battle, the fleet rests under a star-studded sky. Cleopatra stands at the bow of her ship, listening to the soft slap of water against the hull. She murmurs to herself about destiny, power, and survival, her voice nearly swallowed by the wind. You sense that she is both terrified and exhilarated, knowing the stakes for herself, Antony, and her son. The world is about to pivot, and she will either rise higher than ever or fall into the shadows of history. And you, quietly trailing, cannot help but marvel at her audacity, her intellect, and her sheer will. In these moments, Cleopatra is both human and myth, mother and monarch, lover and strategist, all shimmering against the backdrop of the endless Nile and the Mediterranean horizon, a woman determined to leave her mark on eternity. The sun rises with a muted glow over the Ionian Sea, and you trudge alongside Cleopatra on the deck of her flagship, feeling the wooden planks tremble beneath the rhythm of the rowers' oars. The battle of Actium looms, and the tension is palpable, like static before a storm. Cleopatra moves with effortless authority, her eyes scanning the horizon, lips pressed in quiet calculation. You can feel the weight of centuries pressing down, history holding its breath as she prepares to confront Rome's most formidable commander. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra and Antony's combined fleet faces Octavian's forces at Actium in 31 BCE. The battle will be a turning point not just for them but for the fate of Egypt and the Mediterranean world. You watch as the two sides position themselves, the clatter of armor, the flapping of banners, and the cries of sailors creating a chaotic symphony of impending conflict. Antony relies on Cleopatra's support and her presence as a morale boost for the fleet. Quirky tidbit: ancient accounts describe Cleopatra's flagship adorned with sails dyed purple and gold, designed to gleam in the sun and intimidate opponents. Some historians claim she even had a troupe of musicians playing exotic instruments to maintain morale and signal commands. Imagine the surreal spectacle, the clash of war with a soundtrack of lyres and flutes, creating a bizarrely operatic battlefield. Historians still argue whether these details were factual or exaggerated to romanticize Cleopatra's persona. You follow Cleopatra to her private quarters aboard the flagship, where maps, dispatches, and small ceremonial trinkets are scattered across a polished table. She traces the movements of ships with a jeweled finger, her mind calculating strategy, contingencies, and human psychology. Every rower, sailor, and officer is a variable, every gust of wind a potential game-changer. You notice a flicker of anxiety, but she masks it beneath an aura of serene command. Intimate moments emerge even amidst chaos. Antony approaches quietly, and for a brief second, Cleopatra lets her guard down. Their exchange is subtle, a shared glance, a soft touch on the shoulder, a whispered word. In these fleeting moments, you understand that history is not just a series of battles and decrees, it is also personal, human, and profoundly emotional. Quirky aside, Cleopatra reportedly tested the seaworthiness of her vessels by having servants release live birds from the deck, observing if the wind and currents affected their flight path. Some historians suggest this was symbolic, but the idea of a queen conducting such experiments is both absurd and quintessentially her. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra actively participated in naval strategy or served primarily as a symbolic figure to inspire Antony's men. Observing her now, it's clear that she does both seamlessly, blending intellect, charisma, and intuition into a single commanding presence. The battle begins. Smoke and splintered wood fill the air. Cleopatra stands firm, directing the fleet with a mixture of signals, gestures, and whispered orders. You feel the chaos surge around you, arrows slicing through sails, shouts in multiple languages, the roar of clashing bronze. Yet she remains poised, the eye of the storm, radiating both command and calm. And then, you see it, Antony's forces begin to falter, and Cleopatra makes a fateful decision. She orders her ships to withdraw strategically, a move both criticized and praised by historians. The sight is breathtaking, a golden-sailed armada slipping away like a mirage, leaving Octavian's forces stunned. Some interpret it as cowardice, others as brilliance, an audacious gamble to preserve lives and resources. You feel the tension and contradiction in her choice, understanding that history will debate her actions for millennia. As the sun dips low, the remnants of the battle settle into an uneasy quiet. Cleopatra stands at the prow of her flagship, eyes fixed on the horizon, and you sense the weight of survival, loss, and relentless ambition pressing down on her. She whispers to herself, perhaps to you, "This is not the end. It is a beginning." You realize she embodies both triumph and tragedy, a woman forever balancing love, power, and destiny against the ever-turning tide of history. The aftermath of action leaves a strange silence across the Mediterranean, like the world itself is holding its breath. You trudge along the palace halls of Alexandria with Cleopatra, the air thick with incense, dust, and the lingering scent of burned timber from the fleet. Her face is composed, almost statuesque, but you catch glimpses of exhaustion, the toll of both love and leadership etched into her eyes. Antony, bruised in spirit and body, lingers nearby, his presence both grounding and fragile, as Cleopatra navigates the delicate dance between mourning, strategy, and survival. Mainstream historical fact: after the defeat at Actium, Antony and Cleopatra retreat to Egypt, regrouping forces and attempting to maintain political control in the face of Octavian's rising power. You can feel the tension among the courtiers and soldiers, whispers of betrayal and despair swirl like dust motes in the sunlight filtering through grand windows. Cleopatra steps lightly but decisively, reminding everyone that the queen's will can bend circumstance to her favor, even after such a staggering setback. Quirky tidbit: some accounts suggest Cleopatra experimented with medicinal concoctions in the palace after the battle, using everything from crushed gemstones to exotic herbs in hopes of healing Antony and boosting morale. You can almost picture her stirring a golden liquid under flickering torchlight, muttering to herself about balancing chemistry and magic. Historians still debate whether these were practical remedies or elaborate symbolic rituals, but they certainly emphasize her flair for dramatic problem-solving. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's retreat was a calculated strategy to buy time or a desperate act driven by fear. Observing her as she moves through the halls, you notice that even in retreat, she embodies poise, intellect, and control. Each gesture, hands lightly brushing the railings, a deliberate nod to an aide, is laden with intention, subtly reinforcing her command over the fragile political landscape. You follow her into a private chamber where Antony rests. Cleopatra leans over him, adjusting pillows, murmuring soft encouragements. Their intimacy is quiet, a shared warmth amidst the growing storm of Octavian's advance. These moments are fleeting, yet they reveal the depth of Cleopatra's human side, tender, vulnerable, yet unyielding. You realize that this duality, queen and lover, is precisely what makes her legend endure. Quirky aside, Cleopatra reportedly sent personal gifts to Octavian during this time, including exotic animals and intricately crafted jewelry, in an attempt to delay or distract him diplomatically. Imagine the surreal scene: lions, peacocks, and golden trinkets arriving at Rome, all bearing the subtle message of Egyptian cunning. Some historians claim these gestures were diplomatic genius, others see them as theatrical vanity. Despite the looming threat, Cleopatra remains focused on her son, Caesarion. You watch her trace lines on maps, planning territories, alliances, and escape routes, while occasionally lifting her gaze to the boy, her expression softening. Her maternal instinct mixes seamlessly with her political strategy, revealing a woman who wields love and ambition as equal instruments of power. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's final political maneuvers were primarily for her own survival, Antony's legacy, or Caesarion's inheritance. From where you stand, it's clear that she is orchestrating all three at once, balancing emotion and calculation like a masterful conductor. As night falls over Alexandria, Cleopatra walks to the balcony overlooking the Nile, the city below glowing with torchlight and quiet desperation. You feel the pulse of history through the stone and water, the whisper of inevitability mingling with her steely resolve. She murmurs to herself, and maybe to you, the words that echo across time. Even in retreat, we write our own destiny. The stars shimmer above, mirroring her resolve as she braces for the final chapters of her life, love, and reign, a legend entwined with triumph, tragedy, and indomitable will. You walk silently behind Cleopatra through the dimly lit corridors of the royal palace, the flickering torches casting long, shifting shadows on the walls. The weight of Alexandria feels heavier now, as though the city itself senses the impending collapse. Courtiers whisper rumors of Octavian's encroaching forces, while merchants and soldiers alike scurry with anxious energy. Cleopatra's gait remains steady, almost serene, but you notice the subtle tightening of her jaw, the quickening of her heartbeat beneath the elegant robes she wears. There's a sense that every decision she makes now is not just about power, but survival. Mainstream historical fact: as Octavian closes in on Alexandria in 30 BCE, Cleopatra negotiates with Roman envoys and orchestrates defensive measures, hoping to protect her son Caesarion and preserve her dynasty. You watch her move between advisors and generals, her presence alone commanding attention, her every gesture designed to convey authority and calm. She inspects fortifications along the Nile, her eyes sharp as she evaluates weaknesses, the cool breeze ruffling her hair like a subtle reminder that even in the midst of political chaos, the world continues to turn. Quirky tidbit: some sources suggest Cleopatra had a secret underground tunnel system built beneath the palace, possibly to allow escape or clandestine movement of supplies. You imagine her walking through narrow, torchlit passageways, the air damp with the scent of earth and stone, and whispering commands as her loyal servants scurry behind her. Historians still debate whether these tunnels truly existed or were exaggerated over time, but the idea fits her flair for both drama and practical ingenuity. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's negotiations with Rome were genuine attempts at diplomacy or merely stalling tactics to buy time. Observing her in action, you sense both. She is simultaneously calculating, persuasive, and ready to pivot at a moment's notice. Her words are precise, her expressions carefully measured, yet there is a fire in her eyes that betrays a fierce determination. In the quieter moments of the palace, Cleopatra shows a softer, more human side. She walks through the gardens at dusk, inhaling the scent of night-blooming jasmine and lotus, pausing to speak gently to her son. There's tenderness in the way she touches his cheek, adjusts his garments, and whispers protective advice. These intimate interactions reveal a woman who balances the immense weight of her political responsibilities with the warmth and care of a mother determined to shield her child from the harsh tides of fate. Quirky aside, Cleopatra reportedly enjoyed experimenting with perfumes and exotic cosmetics even during this tense period, creating personal scents to enhance her aura of power. You imagine her surrounded by glass vials and fragrant oils, blending aromas with the precision of a modern perfumer. Historians still argue whether these rituals were merely aesthetic indulgences or subtle psychological tools to influence allies and enemies alike. As Octavian's forces tighten their grip, Cleopatra must make fateful choices. You observe her pacing the palace, her mind mapping contingencies, escape routes, and alliances. Every glance toward Caesarion reminds you that she is fighting not just for her own legacy but for the future of her lineage. The night hums with anticipation, shadows shifting in a silent warning of the approaching storm. In these moments, Cleopatra embodies both vulnerability and unyielding will. She whispers quietly to herself, perhaps more to steady her own heartbeat than to anyone else, "I am the Nile, I flow and endure." You sense the layers of her personality, the queen, the mother, the strategist, the legend, all coexisting in a single, formidable presence, ready to confront the final act of her life with courage and cunning. The palace is cloaked in a hushed tension as you follow Cleopatra along the mosaic-lined halls. The scent of lotus and incense mingles with the faint metallic tang of approaching war. You feel the air heavy, almost vibrating with the knowledge that history is about to close a chapter, one of power, romance, and audacious ambition. Cleopatra moves with deliberate grace, each footstep a quiet assertion of authority, even as Octavian's forces encircle Alexandria. The city outside is restless. Murmurs and the occasional clatter of armor punctuate the oppressive quiet, reminding you that the endgame has arrived. Mainstream historical fact: Octavian's siege of Alexandria culminates in the final confrontation of Cleopatra's reign, with Roman forces breaching city defenses and Antony's troops dwindling in both number and morale. You feel the pulse of impending doom as Cleopatra coordinates defenses, negotiates terms, and prepares for what she knows may be her final moments of power. Every glance she casts, every decision she makes, reflects not just strategy but a profound understanding of the weight her choices will carry for history. Quirky tidbit: ancient sources suggest Cleopatra kept a collection of venomous snakes, asp vipers, within the palace, partly as a display of exotic prestige and partly as a last resort instrument. You imagine her moving among golden cages, delicate fingers brushing against silken scales, a blend of fascination and control in her gaze. Historians still debate whether the asp story is literal or a symbolic tale concocted to romanticize her death, but the imagery endures, powerful, deadly, and uniquely her. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's eventual suicide was premeditated or opportunistic, a calculated act of defiance or a desperate escape. Watching her now, you see a woman acutely aware of her legend, understanding that the story told after her death will shape perceptions for millennia. She handles her final moments with a mix of dignity, poise, and almost theatrical precision. In private quarters, Cleopatra writes letters and gives instructions, carefully arranging her legacy. Caesarion's future hangs in balance, her last political act entwined with maternal concern. She pauses to touch the delicate jewelry of her ancestors, the glint of gold reminding her of the dynasty she carries within her, the weight of millennia resting on fragile shoulders. You sense the mix of fear, resolve, and clarity as she plans not just her exit but the preservation of what matters most. Quirky aside, some accounts claim Cleopatra tested different types of poisons in small doses, not out of recklessness, but as a practical study of their effects. Picture her surrounded by tiny vials, scribbled notes, and careful observation, blending scientific curiosity with survival instinct. Scholars still argue about the authenticity of these accounts, but they reinforce her image as a woman who merged intellect with instinct in every aspect of her life. As the sun dips below the horizon, the final hours of Cleopatra's life unfold with almost ritualistic solemnity. She reclines in her chambers, the asp story lingering in your mind like a ghost of myth and history. Antony lies nearby, broken in body and spirit, and you sense their shared understanding, love, ambition, and tragedy interwoven, inseparable. Cleopatra whispers to herself, or perhaps to the shadows of her ancestors, words meant to comfort, console, and assert her enduring presence: I have loved, I have ruled, I have endured. The city outside grows still, the Nile reflecting fading light, as she prepares to meet history on her own terms. Her final acts are both intimate and monumental, a testament to a life that balanced romance, power, and unshakable will, leaving a story that will echo through eternity. The final morning in Alexandria arrives quietly, as if the city itself hesitates to witness the closing of this chapter. You walk alongside Cleopatra through the palace corridors, noticing how the light catches the polished marble, glinting like liquid gold. Outside, the Nile moves lazily, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding on its banks. Cleopatra moves with a calm that belies the storm outside. There's an almost eerie serenity in the way she arranges her final thoughts, her letters, her personal effects. Every action is deliberate, measured, a queen aware of both the end and her enduring legacy. Mainstream historical fact: Cleopatra commits suicide in 30 BCE, reportedly by the bite of an asp, after Antony's death and the fall of Alexandria to Octavian. You feel the gravity of the moment as she reclines in her chamber, draped in silks, her mind calm yet vibrant with reflection. Her final choices, how, when, and with what dignity, embody a combination of courage, defiance, and profound awareness of history watching. Quirky tidbit: legends suggest she sent a last message to Octavian via a messenger, perhaps a cryptic note or a symbolic gift, asserting her intellect even in death. You imagine the messenger trembling, clutching a scroll or box, aware that the contents might reshape the story forever. Scholars still debate whether these gestures actually occurred or were later embellishments to enhance her myth, but they reinforce the image of Cleopatra as endlessly calculating, even in her final moments. Historians still argue whether the asp was a literal instrument of death or a carefully crafted symbol in the story of Cleopatra's demise. You stand in her chamber, imagining the mixture of fear, resolve, and acceptance, an intimate blend of human vulnerability and monumental presence. The quiet intimacy of her final hours contrasts sharply with the political chaos outside, highlighting the duality that has defined her entire life. You watch her attend to Caesarion, ensuring he is safe, a mother's tenderness mingling with a queen's foresight. Cleopatra's love, ambition, and intellect converge in these last gestures. She is fully aware of the weight her choices carry for both her child and her enduring legend. Even as death approaches, her attention to detail, her awareness of symbolism, and her strategic brilliance remain undiminished. Quirky aside, some stories claim she had a favorite song she requested be sung in her final moments, a melody meant to summon calm and courage. You can almost hear the soft notes drifting through the chambers, a lullaby blending Egyptian tradition with personal solace. Scholars debate the accuracy of this detail, but it adds a tender, humanizing layer to her myth, reminding you that Cleopatra's story is as much about emotion as ambition. As Cleopatra closes her eyes, the palace seems to exhale, the Nile reflecting the rising sun with gentle brilliance. You sense the stillness, the weight of history pressing in, and the enduring power of her life echoing through the centuries. Antony, Caesarion, and the grandeur of Alexandria all linger in memory as her story reaches its poignant, powerful conclusion. Even in death, Cleopatra is alive in every whispered legend, every artistic rendering, every historical debate. Her life, love, and indomitable will carved into the fabric of time. You feel the echoes of her laughter, her strategic brilliance, and her tender humanity, all intertwined in a final, unforgettable presence. Wind down, 300 words. Now, as the story of Cleopatra settles in your mind, take a deep breath and let the tension ease. You can feel the Nile's gentle current in your imagination, the warm sunlight fading into soft twilight. Her life, with all its triumphs, heartbreaks, and cunning maneuvers, unfolds like a vivid dream, leaving you suspended between awe and quiet reflection. The echoes of palace corridors, scented gardens, and whispered commands dissolve into a tranquil hush. Allow your body to sink deeper into comfort, your mind tracing the intricate patterns of her story without rush. Remember the laughter, the clever gestures, the subtle power plays that defined her, and let them drift gently into a landscape of calm. Cleopatra's voice, her presence, and her intimate moments with Antony and Caesarion float in the quiet air, blending with the gentle hum of your surroundings. You are wrapped in a narrative that stretches across history, yet so tenderly human, so approachable, that it feels like a lullaby in motion. Think of the stars above Alexandria, glittering and timeless, reflecting the enduring legend of a woman who loved fiercely, ruled wisely, and faced the end with unparalleled courage. Let the intricate mix of myth, history, and personal intimacy fade slowly, a soft exhale of imagination and empathy. Now, dim your thoughts with gentle ease, your mind cradled by Cleopatra's story, her world, and the quiet hum of history moving onward. drift into rest with the knowledge that some stories, like hers, never truly end. They live in whispers, in wonder, and in the soft cadence of your dreams tonight.